Good morning. Thank you for being with us today. I'm Joe Reeb, your lay leader for this service. Reverend Christine Robinson from our Ministerial Transition Team is in our virtual pulpit for the first time today to introduce herself and talk about change as a part of our spiritual journey. Sonia Bergeron, another team member, will be our liturgist today. And I'd like to acknowledge the fine work of the tech team for making our return to a Zoom-only service as graceful as it is. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Marion is our welcome team rep today. Just say, it's my first time in the chat, and she'll check in with you. If you've been here before, you'll notice some changes, and here are a couple. We'll do joys and sorrows by chat today. Sonia will tell us how that works in a little bit. Today we're letting you choose your breakout room. I'll tell you how that works just before the postlude. And I have 3 announcements. Online RE, also known as ERE, is back. Starting September 12th, children in 1st through 8th grades are invited to join us for virtual religious exploration. Parents, you can register your children using our online form. AB will put that link in for the form into the chat. For more information on the program or to volunteer, email dre@asuuc.net. AB will Put D's email address in the chat also. Our in-gathering service is also September 12th, and it will be on Zoom, but we'll have a way for you to participate in our traditional water communion. Details are coming soon, so start saving water from those meaningful experiences. A celebration of life service for Bob Armenter has not been scheduled yet, but it is likely to be in September or October. We'll keep you posted. I invite you now to take a focusing breath and reflect on the shared sanctity of this gathering time brought to you by you. As I ask you to imagine me ringing a bell, because I don't have one with me right now. And for a chalice lighting today, Andy Walker will light a chalice at his home that will be visible on Zoom until he extinguishes it later in the service. Our reading is number 448 in our Singing the Living Tradition hymnal, written by Christine long ago, enough to be included there. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Good morning, everybody. So happy to see you all here virtually. So for today's story for all ages, we're going to be telling the story about the Chinese farmer, or also known as Maybe It's Good. So once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer who had a little bit of land and a family to feed. He was poor, but he had just enough to make it. He had his oldest son and a horse that were able to help out around the property. But as long as he had them, everything was smooth sailing. Now, this story is much more fun if we do switch to gallery view. Rick, I'm not sure if you can change that, or if you guys go up into the top corner just for that view screen, you can switch it to gallery, because I want all of you guys involved in this. Let me see there. Now I have you all in gallery. Okay, so I'm going to have you all join in, and I'll let you know when that moment happens. But for right now, let's head back over to ancient China. So one day, somebody left the farmer's gate open, and one of his horses got out. And one of his horses, his only horse, got out. So all of the neighbors come by and they're all lamenting, saying, "Oh no, what are you going to do? How are you going to support your family? This is such a tragedy." And him being a very philosophical sort, here's where I'm going to have you guys join in with me. He says, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we'll see." So now I want all of you guys to say that. Big old shrug with me. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we'll see. Beautiful. So then, lo and behold, the next day, his stallion comes back and he has a bunch of mares in tow. So everybody in his community comes by. What an amazing blessing. How fantastic this is. You have been blessed. You have such abundance now. What a great thing this is. And his philosophical self, say it with me, says, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we'll see." So now his oldest son, the one that helps out around the property, says that he's going to get out there and he's going to start training those mares. He gets out there and the mares want nothing to do with that. So one of them ends up kicking him and breaking his leg. All of the neighbors come by and I bet you can guess. They're like, "Oh no, what a tragedy. How terrible this is. How will you feed your family if you don't have your son helping you out?" And he says, "Maybe it's bad, maybe it's good, we'll see." So then a week later, a war broke out. And so the emperor's soldiers started to come around and they were looking for young, healthy men to come join and help out the war. They see the son, he's all laid up with his broken leg. And they say, "Okay, well, we can't take him. He's not good for us. So he gets to stay home." All of the members of the community come by saying, "How amazing. What a gift that he broke his leg. Now he doesn't have to go to war. Once he heals, your family is saved. Everything is great." And I bet you guys can guess. The farmer says, "Maybe it's good. Maybe it's bad. We'll see." And of course, this story can continue to go on, but I think you guys get the idea. And this story does come from the Taoist tradition, but its wisdom and the wisdom of all of world's tradition is that we should accept what we can't change. And it's how do we sit there and view it saying, "Okay, maybe this is good, maybe this is bad. Let's just see where it takes us." So thank you guys all so much. So great to see all of you.
Hi, I'm Sonia Bergeron, a member of your Ministerial Transition Team, and working alongside Reverend Christine Robinson and Reverend Roger Butts. And my focus on the team is the interim work. I'll be walking alongside you, the congregation, as you reflect on where you've been, and as you plan for who you want to be, preparing for your calling of a settled minister. And you'll learn more about me when I give this sermon on September 12th. And you'll hear more about our interim work together in the months to come. And I'm looking forward to our journey. So now's the time to please join me in a meditation. Taking in a deep breath and letting it out with a long, slow exhale. And then another deep breath in with a long, slow exhale. May we know peace. May our hearts remain open. May we be awake to our true divine nature. May we be healed, and may we be a source of healing for others. May we know peace, a peace that surpasses all understanding. May our hearts be open to compassion and joy. May we not forget who we are, beings of stardust, children of Mother Earth. May we be loved so that we may share love with those in our lives. May we know peace. May our hearts remain open. May we be awake to our true divine nature. May we be healed, and may we be a source of healing for others. Now's the time for holding one another in our beloved community, sharing our sorrows and our joys. And I invite you in this moment to share silently by writing in the chat. And for those who are not familiar with the chat function, you can find that icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen by bringing your mouse to the area, bringing your mouse to the bottom of your Zoom screen, and there's several icons that will pop up. One of them should say chat. And if you don't see the chat, you might find it under the one that says more. You might find it under there. So writing in the chat, we ask that you share the truth of your sorrows, your burdens, disappointments, fears, or sadness, with the understanding that sharing our burdens in community may lighten the load. And at the same time, you're invited to share your joys, your triumphs, with the knowledge that these things shared help us all to move forward with more strength and with more hope. And you may continue sharing as we move on. And we know that these are not all the sorrows and not all the joys in our beloved community. So we acknowledge those things that were not written down today, but held close in our hearts. And our pastoral prayer was written by Elizabeth Harding. May our challenging stories, the ones full of pain and sorrow, merge with the stories of joy and laughter as we reflect and remember, held by the great sustaining love that accompanies us. May we feel content in the richness of this sustaining love. And I invite you to put one hand on your heart. Maybe you can feel your heart beating, acknowledging the compassion for yourself. The universal compassion which is not separate from us, but is integral to who we are. And then I invite you to bring the other hand up to our beloved community, acknowledging the compassion for one another. Sensing this compassion in both giving and in receiving. It is with compassion that we come together for this worship time. And it is with compassion that we are keeping our social distance. And as we lift up our hands, may you absorb into all that you are, all the love and good wishes which surround you. Blessed be May it be so.
Breathing Underwater by Sister Carol Bielik from an unpublished work. I built my house by the sea, not on the sands, mind you, not on the shifting sand. And I built it of rock, a strong house by a strong sea. And we got well acquainted, the sea and I, good neighbors. Not that we spoke much. We met in silences, respectful, keeping our distance, but looking our thoughts across the fence of sand. Always the fence of sand our barrier, always the sand between. And then one day, and still don't know how it happened, the sea came. Without warning, without welcome even, not sudden and swift, but a swift shifting across the sand like wine, less like the flow of water than the flow of blood, slow but coming, slow but flowing like an open wound. And I thought of flight, and I thought of drowning, and I thought of death. And while I thought, the sea crept higher till it reached my door, and I knew then there was neither flight nor death nor drowning. That when the sea comes calling, you stop being neighbors, well acquainted, friendly at a distance neighbors, and you give your house for a coral castle, and you learn to breathe underwater.
Sometime last week, I heard someone quip that the only thing we hate more than change is update. I wondered for a moment why we would hate update more than change, because I think it's true. After all, updates bring new tools into our lives and better safety for our devices. I suppose one reason is because updates come on us suddenly, when we had something else we needed our computer to do. While I was the minister at First Unitarian in Albuquerque, a ministry that spanned the distance between the mimeograph machine in use when I got there in 1988 and the video-assisted worship we had when I left, the video computer in the AV booth started to update itself when we started it up on Sunday mornings, every week. Yikes. After a few weeks of that, I learned that it's possible to schedule computer updates. Microsoft just assumes that nobody who matters uses their computer at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, but they're willing to be flexible if you ask them. We started hating updates a lot less when they could be accomplished on Thursday afternoons on our schedule. Another reason that much as we hate change, updates are worse, is that updates come to us from big tech and are mostly mysterious to us. Mostly, we humans are suspicious and irritable when we don't feel like we know what's going on. I wish we knew more about fires and mudslides. I wish we knew that just one more round of COVID shots would make this pandemic disappear, or that we understood climate change. It would be so much easier to deal with all the changes we're coping with now, if only we knew more about them. We're living in times of massive, mostly unwelcome, and mostly not well understood change. That's being really hard. Besides the considerable challenges of change in the world, you All Souls folks are coping with the fact that a beloved minister you knew well has been replaced by 3 people, 2 ministers and a ministerial candidate that you don't know. Yikes. Well, you know Roger a bit. In the next 3 weeks, each of us will take a turn telling you about ourselves, our journey to Unitarian Universalism, and what we believe. I'll go this week. Roger will introduce himself next week, and Sonia the week after. You'll find that the changes of our lives have given us different styles, different beliefs, and we've had a different journey to and within Unitarian Universalism. We tell you our stories so that you'll know the team that will be leading you during this interim period, but also in the hopes that you will reflect on your own journey, your own changes, your own beliefs. Most Unitarian Universalists are what we call come-inners. That is to say, grew up in another faith and at some point came into this one. Very few of us, less than 10% on the average, are cradle UUs. Want to see this for yourselves? Switch to gallery mode. Now, how many of you grew up as Unitarian or Universalist or Unitarian Universalist? Just raise your hands. And how many of you are come-inners? You can raise your hands. You see what I mean. As for me, my story is in many ways the mirror opposite of that of the majority of UUs. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and my parents were unchurched until they joined a UU church when I was 8. That church and that era of Unitarian Universalism was very humanistic in its focus. Sunday school was about the wonder of the natural world and how to live this life well by thinking for oneself, about being ethical in one's dealings with others and leaning towards justice in society. I and the adults around me seemed to believe that this life and this world were the only ones there were. There was no magic, no spiritual world, nothing after death. In that congregation, God was considered a relic of a less scientific past, and our job in this life was to be rational and stoic and not indulge ourselves in daydreams, but rather to learn to understand the real world. It was a bit Spock-like. I bet this world view resonates with many of you. It was very countercultural, though, in the 1960s, and I was aware that these beliefs were not shared by my friends. But it was the faith of the people around me that I loved, and I thought it was glorious. I cherished the opportunity to tell my 4th grade teacher that I was an atheist, and therefore I didn't have to say the Lord's Prayer. I liked arguing religion with the Jehovah's Witnesses who came to the door so frequently that my father finally had to warn them off. Oh yes, life was good. Like that lady who built her beach house on the rock, I felt very secure in my beliefs through my teen years, superior even. But little eddies of water kept invading my nice, secure beach. As I matured and began to see past the faith of my parents and my childhood, I started noticing that it was a pretty big ocean out there with depths and possibilities that I had neglected to notice. I was deeply into classical music study in those days, and the religious music that was a part of both school and church music moved me in uncomfortable ways. The sea was rising. Those watery eddies ebbed and flowed for some years. My conversations with people of more orthodox faith became more curious and less combative. I did some reading and took some philosophy classes. It occurred to me that in this big world with such deep and unknowable places in it, I had been pretty darn sure of myself, maybe too sure. From my house of stone, I wandered a little closer to the water's edge, stuck my toe in, experimented. It was a long, slow, easy change. I went from proud atheist to humble agnostic. That is, from someone who believes that there is no such thing as a God to someone who believes that the universe is too grand and amazing to know really for sure about things like God. I went from a proud atheist to a humble agnostic so gently that I hardly noticed. I learned to sing a new song, and I didn't much miss the old one. Transition, change, update, check. While I was focused on getting an undergraduate degree in music, I only went to church when I was home on vacations. Once I graduated to do, well, I really didn't know quite what, though I had come to realize that I didn't really have what it took to be a professional musician. I started to attend a UU church again. It became an anchor in my life that was sort of adrift in those days, and I valued it. That church was also more in my new theological line, a little more open to mystery than the church of my childhood. And then one Sunday, I heard a woman minister preach. In those days, most denominations didn't ordain women. The UUs had not ordained very many in a long time. And so I had never heard a woman preach before. It was an electrifying revelation. By the end of the sermon, I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I mean, I really knew. I knew so strongly, I wondered if I was losing my sanity. I didn't really believe that such sudden knowledge could be legitimate. This was no playing footsie on the beach with the water. This was being tossed in by surprise and learning to swim. Nothing had ever happened to me before to introduce me to that kind of change. I discovered that when I told people that I was wondering, remember, almost no one had even heard of a female minister in those days. They were skeptical and interested and almost immediately started treating me differently. It was very weird. But I was infatuated, obsessed, on my way. I had no doubts that this was my path. I tried to keep my humility and test this direction for my life, and those tests seemed to come out okay. I found myself in seminary. I discovered what it was like to have a passion for what I was learning rather than just a need to succeed. I was dizzy with change. This new song was forced down my throat. That first change, the drift from atheism to agnosticism, was one way change comes into our lives, slow and manageable. It was like the changes of aging often are. Often we barely notice them for a long time. The change that propelled me into ministry, though, that was a sudden change. It was more like what happened in March 2020 when we went from normal life to very much not normal life just within a few days. It's like what happens when there's a sudden death in your family, when you catch a glimpse of Mr. or Ms. Right across a crowded room, or when the ocean suddenly consumes that rock house you always assumed would be there forever. Most of you have been there a few times in your life too, I know. You know the shock, the mindless just getting things done, the despair, the recovery, or if it was a good change, the shock, the joyful work, the living into a new reality. The Chinese farmers' neighbors found it very easy to declare all changes either good or bad, and to become elated or depressed. Humans seem hardwired to do that, but it is usually a mistake. It often happens that our judgment is premature or too simple, that what seems like a bad change works out in the end, or even if the change brings pain and sorrow and adjustment, some good things come as well. If only an increase in our ability to adjust. And even when changes are overall good, there are always downsides and unintended consequences to deal with. My family never really understood my theological change, although everybody was polite about it. I was still young enough to feel the tug of wanting to be like everybody that I loved. Deciding to go to seminary was a great change for my life, but it also meant pulling up roots and moving to Boston and re-entering the academic world, which, because of my focus on music beginning in junior high school, I had kept at a distance since my early teens. Returning to graduate school was learning to sing a new song, big time. My life at seminary and the experiences of ministry brought changes to my theology over the years as well. Agnosticism morphed into theism. My rational approach to faith was quite mystical for a while. The sacred feminine seemed present in my life for a phase or two. These days, my scripture of choice is the Tao Te Ching, the oldest human scripture still in use today, but I still feel enriched by Christian, Jewish, and pagan wisdom. I try to center myself in the wisdom of the Tai Chi. That's the formal name for what we Westerners call the yin-yang symbol. This is a popular symbol. Black and white are the traditional colors, but thinking of black and white is kind of fraught these days when we talk about black and white people. So I prefer another set of colors to make the point that things are in constant flow, that everything contains a spot of its contrary, that nothing is pure, nothing is good or bad, weak or strong, male or female. You'll hear that philosophy shot through my preaching and my leadership, along with a firm belief that the middle path, the path of moderation, is usually better than the extremes, and that our focus should be doing well what is put before us. I hope I'll have a chance to hear about some of your faith journeys this year and the philosophies and watchwords that guide you in your lives as we walk together through the challenging changes of our times and our lives, as well as the challenge for you all as a congregation of transitioning from one settled minister to another. You had a wonderful, but not perfect, here comes my yin-yang philosophy, experience with Nori. It was a great song, and you learned it well. But it's time to learn a new one. It's our job as a transition team to get you ready for your new settled minister, because we want that experience to be more like singing a new song and less like learning to breathe underwater. And about learning to sing a new song, among the things the transition team is charged with doing is to accomplish the tasks that face the congregation as they go through their change in ministers. Some are emotional, like getting to the place where you don't miss Nori so much that you can only imagine a new minister who is just like her. Some are technical, like making sure the staff has up-to-date job descriptions that actually describe the work they're being asked to do, and making sure the database is accurate and the staff policies are up to date, and so on. Some are learning tasks, such as reviewing your history. Sonia will be in charge of making sure that all those things are getting done over the next 2 years, and the three of us will share the doing of them. My part will be the worship aspects of your life, with lots of help from Roger and Sonia, your musicians, all the folks who've been helping out this last year. Also, I'll be working on the administrative aspects of your church life, such as managing the staff and seeing to basic administration. Also to assisting and coaching your leaders. While we learn to sing new songs and breathe underwater, we also have to keep on swimming, to hold worship, to offer religious education, to reach out to those among us who are having a tough time, and to continue to share and celebrate our community, even if we do it at a distance. Some of the interim tasks won't impact you directly, but they'll help assure that your next minister has a solid foundation to start on. Others will impact you. For instance, and for many of you, this will be a hard one, changes in worship. I invite you to see if you can adopt an attitude of curiosity towards these changes. Some are just necessary. For instance, we have to have a worship service that gives 3 people on your transition team ample face time with your congregation, rather than just one minister. Every minister has different styles of worship and different working abilities, and it's our job to shake things up a little bit so that you will know more about what you like and don't like when it comes to choosing a new minister, and you won't go up in smoke if the minister you choose suggests you try some things that are new to you. So we will all be more flexible than might be comfortable for us for a while. Here's something that might be the hardest thing of all for some of you. It really is important that Nori and all she brought you becomes a part of your past, honored and beloved, but past. Because of that, one of the transition tasks is to look around with a newcomer's eye and notice where the saintly past minister is still enshrined. Nori was a great poet, and she modified several hymns that you love so much you use them nearly every week at the beginning and end of your service. I've watched you sing them when I joined your services this summer. They are lovely. They are so important to you that a considerable number of you know them by heart. Probably, for many of you, they are the essence of your love for this congregation. They might even bring tears to your eyes. I get it. I have a few hymns like that too. But you see the problem for your transition team in this. For your next settled minister to come into an order of service that routinely has two hymns that are intimately related to the predecessor is a little like a lover who goes to his beloved's home to propose marriage and finds pictures of the former spouse lining the mantelpiece. Not so good, right? So one of our tasks this year is to learn some new songs. And since we can't sing together, at least for a while, our task will be to learn some new ways of enjoying music together at the beginning and the end of the service. You'll still hear your old standards on occasion, but they can't be regulars anymore. And there really are some interesting and exciting possibilities to experiment with, as you will see. That one might feel like learning to breathe underwater. I hope you'll understand why it's important, even while we all feel the loss for a while. No doubt some of you will find this a welcome change, and that's okay too. And I hope and expect that other aspects of this interim period will feel both comforting and challenging, and that we will come by working together for the future of this precious congregation to respect and care for one another.
Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream. Written by Brenda L. Lovely. Instructions for giving by text, online, or by mail will be in the title slide for our offering song and also in the chat.
There's been a change in me, a kind of moving on. Though what I used to be, I still depend upon. For now I realize that good can come from bad, that may not make me wise, but oh, it makes me glad. And I never thought I'd leave behind my childhood dreams, but I don't mind, for now I love the world I see. No change of heart, a change in me. For in my dark despair, I slowly understood my perfect world out there had disappeared for good. But in its place I feel a true life begin, and it's so good and real, it must come from within. And I never thought I'd leave change in me. No change of heart, a change in me.
For the gifts which we have received and the gifts which we ourselves are, may we be truly grateful. May we be committed to using these gifts to make a difference in the world, to increase love and justice, to decrease hatred and oppression, to expand beloved community, to share and to keep sharing. May it be so. Our benediction this morning is found in our hymnal, number 684, and these words are by Duke T. Gray. The blessing of truth be upon us. The power of love direct and sustain us. May the peace of this community preserve our going out and our coming in from this day forth until we meet again.